Therapists of Reddit. What was your biggest I know I'm not supposed to judge you, but holy shit moment? I was counseling a 13-year-old girl for anxiety and she reported sexual abuse from her stepdad. I called her mom and told her mother I needed to call Child Protective Services. Turns out that CPS was already aware and the abuse was first reported around the patient's age 7. Mom was aware of the abuse and stayed with her husband anyway. It was a complicated situation. And it wasn't. How could she not do more to protect her daughter? Sorry lady, I'm judging. Once had a patient whose wife shook their baby to death. He wanted help reconnecting with his wife. At the time I was a young father of a newborn myself. And he triggered a lot of fear in me for my own child. A deep loathing of his spouse. And pity, the how pathetic kind, for the patient. I tried for 3 sessions. Met his spouse and everything, before handing the case over to my supervisor, who knew about my initial reactions. And tried to help me through it. Unfortunately, it ended up being more about my feelings than his. And I was new to the profession at the time. These things are expected to crop up from time to time. But I was still taken aback by my own reactions. I do acute pediatric inpatient behavioral therapy. Has never happened with a child. And never will. Parents on the other hand can be real pieces of shit. And the way they treat/abuse their children then throw them off on us and scream fix them. I'm a big burly guy and I've cried many nights over this. My professor once shared what a patient said that made her quit her job. I didn't rate my daughter. She liked it. The daughter was 6. She couldn't take it anymore. She worked in a rehabilitation center for people who have been sentenced for serious crimes and were forced to get mental help. Really difficult job and this pushed her over the edge. I was once in my psychiatrist's office a bi-monthly 15 minutes med check. She asked me what was going on more as conversation. I told her that in the last 6 weeks, my 3 elders, aunt and 2 uncles, I was guardian/conservator for had died one right after the other. My wife had a heart attack. My daughter attempted suicide. And my mom broke her hip and had laid on her floor for a week before being found. She drank and ate from the dog's bowls. I got that call within 10 minutes of setting up the last funeral. She stopped the meeting. Got on the phone with a therapist in the office next to her and had her postpone her next meeting to speak with me. I was so fucked up. I had no idea. I think she saved my life. I feel like a lot of the comments saying that they never judge their clients might be working in voluntary services or they've been very fortunate in their client base. Judgment isn't an inherently bad thing. It's how we know that murdering people is wrong. So when a convicted pedophile client told me, "Nothing gets me going like a pair of little girls' worn panties," you better believe I judged the F out of him. I continued to work with him, and I treated him with compassion and respect, because he's a human being worthy of both. I did my job, because I'm a professional. But I can't honestly say that I didn't judge him. I judge that he should never be around children. I judge that he is not yet ready for change. I judge that his access to his own daughter should be closely supervised. That's a lot of judgments. Understanding your own inherent biases and how they influence your work is a very important part of training and practice. Here's my most recent one. As the pandemic worsened here in the US and more lockdowns are on their way, one of my most extroverted clients and I brainstormed ways to meet her social needs while remaining safe. The following week she cancelled her session and told me that she's positive for COVID after attending an orgy, which definitely wasn't one of our ideas. I let out the deepest, most defeated sigh after I hung up the phone. Lots of people discussing pedophilia as an example of the toughest stuff to not judge despite our training. I haven't yet treated a pedophile, thankfully, at least not an identified one. I did run a men's anger management group though, and some of those men had done some terrible things to women. Most of them I found ways to like and admire for their positive aspects. But there were 2 guys in that group I just could never find unconditional positive regard for. One guy basically never spoke in group. He would give one-word answers and occasionally just discuss how unfair the system was to him. I worked really hard to open him up and find things to connect over, but he never opened up to me or the group. He left the group after he strangled his girlfriend and went to jail. She survived thankfully. The other left group early routinely, showed up late, participated minimally and similarly never wanted to open up honestly. He left early one group after we had discussed him staying to the end and threatened me when I told him he wasn't going to get credit for attendance, something the court required. Oddly, I eventually moved into the apartment below him, completely without knowledge, and listened to him scream at his girlfriend and break S while I called the cops. I judge these men. They're STI. Maybe they're redeemable, but redemption requires self-exploration, and they both refuse to do so. It's worth noting how differently I felt about them than so many others in the group. Men I found ways to help and admire and respect even in spite of their awful behavior in the past. I work with youth and adolescents who have anxiety, trauma, and/or depression. Some of the kids I worked with had some pretty severe attachment issues. Regardless of this, I never thought I'd have to seriously explain 1. You can't just buy a straitjacket for your kid. 2. Feeding your kid ultra spicy ramen each night instead of the meal everyone else is eating isn't specifically defined as abuse, but you have to understand the emotional abuse that this causes. 3. Your kid isn't trying to kill you because they stand in your doorway at night crying. That's likely because they are scared of their traumatic nightmares, but feel like you will just yell at them if they wake you up. My number 1 tip: don't let someone else tell you how you feel/think. If someone says, "You're angry with me," or something to that effect, ask yourself if you really are. If you're not actually angry, then don't spend a second more on it. A lot of kids/family members get hung up on trying to justify their own actions according to someone else's perception. I joined in a review of a secluded patient, and he threw a cup of wee and poo in my face when we opened the door. I tried to be objective about his experience, but I just thought, what a C. I work in inpatient services, so it can be hard to challenge myself at times. Individuals with diagnosis of personality disorder, for example, can do things that in isolation make you think they are just being bratty or manipulative. But to think of the experiences that shape them to react like that in a given situation can help to clear my judgment and find compassion. Harder when someone bites me or hits me with one of our fabulously detachable anti-ligature curtain poles. Though I work with kiddos who have experienced some kind of abuse/trauma. 90% of my clients have been sexually abused. I have a lot of holiest moments, but not from judgment of my clients, but from what happened to them. I've had clients whose father made them help him dismember mom's body after dad murdered her in front of them. I've had clients under the age of 8 who have been sex trafficked. I've had clients who have been forced to film torture porn. I have holiest moments all the time. Clinical psychologist working primarily in forensics here. This means my clients are usually involved in legal proceedings, family court, juvenile court, criminal court, etc. My job is usually to evaluate or provide treatment. I'm not there to judge. That's the judge's job. But of course I have my thoughts. I'm usually impressed by the justifications people make for shitty behavior. The one that irks me the most is when parents manipulate their child against the other parent. I've had to do therapy for a 5-year-old who said she doesn't want to see a parent because they haven't paid child support. Excuse me? What 5-year-old knows, understand, or needs to be worried about child support? Opposite side. If that's accepted too, I was assigned to see the lead psychologist of the local hospital as I was severely depressed and had become suicidal. She literally rolled her eyes at me, told me to grow up, and said she could be having appointments with people who were actually about to kill themselves, not me who was already working with the team. This sent me absolutely spinning, bottling everything up, thinking I didn't deserve help, and ended up in hospital 2 years later after an attempt. When they looked at my records, the hospital suddenly became very interested in any psychological experts I'd previously spoken to, informed them of the above incident. They asked if I knew the name, and I said I didn't. But they had a strong accent. They immediately looked like they were about to burst out crying. Apologized excessively, then informed me they had been fired a year ago. No idea how many people were affected by that therapist. When I was underage, I got caught with a drink on Bourbon Street and got a minor in possession. I was telling my therapist about it and said that the police caught me with a hand grenade in New Orleans. He didn't realize that a hand grenade was a type of drink, and it was funny to watch him try to process that his patient might have just casually told him that he had been caught with a fragmentation grenade. He took a big long pause and said, "Where did you even find a grenade?" I realized the misunderstanding quickly and corrected him. But for a moment he definitely was thinking, holy yes, how do I deal with this? Well, I quit my last therapist because I made him cry uncontrollably. He tried not to, but he just couldn't hold it back. I felt guilty and won't see him anymore. I think he may have lost a child before. I described watching my aunt grieve over her son's body. I felt so much pain losing him, but was explaining how watching my aunt was dramatically worse. The details about her is what made him lose it. I could tell he was reliving something inside his own head.